NBA draft night, a lot of all-season news. What is next for Ben Simmons and the Sixers? What's next for some of the big stars? This is a big day in the NBA offseason. Keith Smith, Spotrac.com, joins us to talk a little bit more about what could happen tonight. And Keith joins us here on a Thursday edition of the Sports Bash. Welcome back, Keith. Good to have you, man. What's going on?
It's draft day. I'm excited. I woke up like a kid on Christmas. I'm ready to go.
So for Sixers fans, this used to be the Christmas day. Now they're kind of past that. They've grown, Christmas. They've grown too old for Christmas all of a sudden. They have the 28th pick. But how is this draft class? We've heard a lot of good things at the top of this draft. So especially with Ben Simmons, if you make a trade and get a top 4 or 5 pick, is this the draft to do it in?
It definitely could be. I don't know that they'll be able to get to that level, but maybe they can. I think you've got 2 guys at the top, Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green, who have really kind of separated themselves. And then there's a little bit of a drop-off in a tier to Evan Mobley, who's pretty good. Then a little bit of a drop-off to Jalen Suggs. Then you get into the Scotty Barnes territory around number 5. And then it starts to flatten out a little bit. We're starting to hear Jonathan Kuminga is slipping a little. But top 7, 8 guys, people feel really good about. Then it's, or really probably more closer to top 5 guys. Then from 6 to about 10, flattens out a little. Then 10 to about 20, it becomes personal preference and fit and those kind of things. But from everything you hear from all the experts and the teams, everybody thinks they're going to get a lot of rotation players, a lot of long-term contributors, but the stars are really in that top 4 or 5 group.
Obviously, the NBA draft is a big day for trades. Ben Simmons is obviously on that list, but do you anticipate a lot of movement tonight?
I do. I think when you look at it, I tweeted about it earlier today, how many picks certain teams own, and it's kind of absurd how many picks teams have. Oklahoma City, for example, has 3 first-rounders and 3 second-rounders. Brooklyn, Detroit, New Orleans, and New York all have 4 total picks. So you're going to see a lot of moving up and down with teams on this draft board. I don't know how many of the star names are going to get moved today as opposed to, a few days later and things like that. I think it's going to be, a very busy off season for those kind of things. I just don't know how much of that happens today.
Yeah. All right. Obviously, Ben Simmons is the big name. There's so much around him. It's imminent. It's going to be tonight. It's going to be soon. They're looking around. Ben Simmons' team's on board. Read the tea leaves for us, Keith Smith. Is Ben Simmons' days as a Sixer over?
Yeah, I think they are. I think we're really close to this. I think what's going to happen with them is they're going to end up finding a deal. Right now, they're putting a huge price tag on trading for Ben Simmons because that's what you do. That's how you start off. Nobody wants to walk away from a trade and say, man, maybe could I have gotten more? You want to start high and then come down as you negotiate. So I think that's where they're putting that massive price tag on him, as they should. But I think it's gone too far now. The things that were said immediately after they lost, maybe you could have got back off that. There's been subsequent reporting that they're not maybe so connected anymore there. And then when you've been in draft rumors for, we're talking a month now, basically, it eventually crosses the bridge of no return, and I think that's about where we're at with Ben Simmons and the 76ers.
So, obviously, there's so many things out there. The Bradley Beal, the Damian Lillard, the Heat, the Pacers, the Cavs. I mean, it seems like everybody has some sort of interest. At this point, if you're Daryl Morey, do you just take the best offer? Do you wait till after the draft to find out what happens with Beal and Lillard? I mean, what's the best way for Daryl Morey to play tonight?
Yeah, I think tonight you have to just do what you have to do. I guess is the best way to put that. If you can get something done with Ben Simmons, that's great. But you can't let everything hold you up on, maybe Damian Lillard wants a trade, maybe Bradley Beal wants a trade. Both of those guys know, and I think they both respect their organizations enough to know that if it was really serious that they wanted out, it would happen today because they want to make sure that if their teams want draft picks tonight, that they can go get that done. So I think those guys, I'm not saying there's not going to be a trade for them because maybe some team comes in and blows either one of those teams away. I just think for the most part it's better to sit back if you're Philadelphia, make the moves you're going to make anyway. Then if that develops, and you try to move on it then, because you can't just kind of live on a hope and a prayer that eventually those guys take, because it's far from guaranteed that you would even get them anyway.
Keith Smith, the Sixers did make a little move today. They traded for the number 53 overall pick. What is the message there?
Yeah, I think what that message is there is Philadelphia is trying to stockpile roster building tools in case they are hard capped and become limited at all in the way that they can build out this roster. As we know, with or without Ben Simmons, they're going to have an expensive team next year. And if they go and make a sign and trade, then they would become hard capped. And what would happen is that limits you in how much salary you can take on. And by adding a draft pick tonight, an extra one, that's one more guy you can add to the bottom of your roster as kind of filler that you have some cost control over, because you would only count for whatever it is you sign him for, versus if you go sign other guys, there's ways that they count a little bit more towards your cap and in the hard cap and those kind of things. So I think this is Daryl Morey doing a little bit of future planning and just kind of balancing himself out to be in a position where it's basically I give myself options tonight based on things I may or may not do down the line.
Keith, obviously the Woj report yesterday said that Simmons and his agent are in step with a move elsewhere. When it gets to that point, is that essentially saying that Simmons is at peace with not wanting to be in Philadelphia anymore?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're there. I think no one is ultimately coming out and saying, he wants a trade or the team is done and they're going to move him. But I think what we are seeing is both sides are saying it without saying it, that it's, hey, we understand this is probably done and we're going to be moving on. And I think it's, for Philadelphia, they're, kind of without saying it again, it's we're moving on from this. We're going to find a trade here. And that's all part of that. I think it's just gone too far to walk it all back, because in a couple months, you have to bring all these guys back together. And it would be pretty awkward to roll Ben Simmons back in and be like, hey, so you're back here. Let's just put all that behind us and move forward. That gets really difficult.
Other guys to keep an eye on tonight at the draft that could be veterans on the move.
Yeah, I think the Pacers are involved in some stuff. So we're going to see what's kind of going on with their team, whether that be TJ Warren. Teams have been chasing him. There's a sense that Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis may be split up. So we may see something ultimately happen on that front. The Lakers are heavily involved in a number of different fronts. They've been shopping Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Kyle Kuzma, and then if they can find a way to get a trade that Montrezl Harrell likes and get him today to commit to opting in, then they could use him in a trade as well. So I think you're going to see those guys involved. And then you've got a handful of other teams like the Clippers. They feel confident they're going to re-sign Kawhi Leonard, but they know they need to add some depth. The Warriors are going to be involved in doing stuff. So I think you're going to see some movement. How much of it is true superstar players? We'll see. Those things don't always happen at the draft. A lot of times those are when free agency actually opens, which this year, that's only a few days away.
Right, exactly. What do you think happens ultimately with Kyle Lowry?
Yeah, I think Kyle Lowry is all signs indicate he's going to be gone from Toronto. And we know Philadelphia and Miami are kind of tops of the list of the teams that would love to have him. So I think what we're going to ultimately see with Lowry is, can they put together, if it's Philadelphia, a sign and trade that makes sense to get Lowry where they can send enough value back to Toronto that kind of balances things out there, because that's the only way they'll be able to get him. And that's probably not going to involve Ben Simmons. That's just a guess that I have. That'll be a whole separate thing. So that's question one there. Or, can Miami can get themselves to probably enough cap space to get in the ballpark at least with him. And then we've heard the New Orleans Pelicans mentioned. That's really kind of picked up steam over the last, let's call it week or so now, that they're interested in Kyle Lowry. And their big trade that they made with Memphis allowed them to get in a position where they can create all kinds of cap space to go make that happen. They also have sign and trade possibilities that they could do, which would open them up. So I think Lowry will be elsewhere. My guess is when we talk probably next, because by then free agency will have been open for a few days, he'll be on one of Philadelphia, Miami, or New Orleans. That's just a guess.
All right. That would be interesting. Obviously, the Lillard Beal stuff, you would not anticipate something happening with either one of those two guys tonight, correct?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen tonight. I honestly don't even think it's going to happen this offseason. I think both of those guys are going to stick right where they are. Then if it's something where we get into the season and things aren't going the way they want, or even if their off seasons don't go the way that they were hoping for, then we'll see maybe at the trade deadline or an in-season move, or in Lillard's case, that could stretch into next summer. But I really don't think either one of those guys in this day and age in the NBA, if a player wants traded, they don't really try to massage the message too much. They just kind of say, hey, I want to go. And then we get things moving. And neither one of those guys seems overly keen on saying, I'm ready to go. And what's also interesting about that is some people say, well, maybe they don't want to upset the fans and those kind of things. I think those fan bases both understand that those players have kind of given them everything that they can and would understand it if, they said, hey, it just hasn't worked out here for, Lillard. It's been almost a decade now of it. And I think the Portland fans would say, hey, you gave it your all. We just couldn't make it happen here.
Right.
All the best to you moving forward.
Let me ask you about those two guys, and this isn't me knocking them at all. I'm just playing devil's advocate for the sake of this. Dame Lillard hasn't been very successful. Is that because his team's just not very good? Like you say, hey, you're trying to get rid of Ben Simmons because you're frustrated by the fact that you feel he's holding the team back. I'm not suggesting Lillard's holding that team back, but neither him nor Beal have been good enough to do much in the postseason. Is it just they're just not on teams that are good enough, or is there something that they do that is the reason why Washington's never won a series with Beal there? Lillard had the run to the Western Conference Finals, but has been mostly knocked out in the first round. Is that something that the Sixers should take under consideration if they make such a deal?
It's a bullet point in your deck that you put together to cover the pros and cons of trading for those guys. But I don't think it's one that comes it's not highlighted with stars around it and everything else. But I think you're going to look at it more and say the roster construction in both of those situations has been a little messy. Damian Lillard, and it's not that CJ McCollum's a bad player by any means, but you're talking about two primary scoring guards that are both undersized that have played together basically for their entire careers. That's always going to limit how far you can go. And that's tough. And I think when you look at Lillard and Beal both, when they have played in the playoffs, they've generally been very, very good. And it's just, they don't necessarily have enough help around them. And then in the Washington side, they looked like for a little bit there that they were really building something. And then unfortunately, John Wall had all the injuries that kind of waylaid him. His career went sideways. Otto Porter Jr. never developed, and then he had injuries, and it just really went south over the last handful of years for the Wizards. So I don't put that as much on Beal and Lillard. I think where I am heartened with those guys is I get nervous when it's this guy's a great player and his team never even sniffs the playoffs, because so many teams make the NBA playoffs that I think if you're that great of a player, you can drag your team into the eighth seed at least once or twice in your career. Those guys have at least done that. And that, gives me a little bit of heart in saying, I can go make that trade and feel pretty confident, put the right guys around them, and they're both, could really, be major winners in this league. If not, contention for the finals, if not, completely win the finals.
Right. So the irony here is that Sixers fans unhappy with Ben Simmons, who played awful in these playoffs, yet was still good enough to knock out Bradley Beal.
Yeah, and that's, one of those things where I think as we kind of look at it, it becomes one of those of let's not let recency bias overtake us too much. Let's use our good sense here and say, hey, if there was ever something to be made there where Simmons goes and Beal comes, I think we're okay, and I feel like we did pretty good in that deal versus, looking back and say, well, Ben Simmons beat him, so that's the way to go. Because otherwise, I think, there might have been a few teams that might have been a little upset if they had the opportunity to trade for Michael Jordan back in the day.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Keith Smith. The NBA draft tonight. Favorite player other than Cunningham is who?
My personal favorite player?
Yeah.
I like Scotty Barnes a lot. I think this guy is going to come in, be an immediate defender on the wing. I think he is one of those guys who can really defend 2 through 4, and maybe even some of the bigger, slower point guards, and maybe even some of the smaller 5s. I think that is such a unique skill, and I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir for y'all because that's what Ben Simmons does. But I really like Scotty Barnes, and I think his shot's going to end up being pretty good. I don't know that he's going to be a great off-the-dribble shooter, but I think he'll be a guy who will make open jump shots. So you pair him with the right creators around him, and I think that kid is going to be really, really good. But give me any of those guys in the top 5, Cunningham, Green, Mobley, Suggs, or Barnes, and I'm going to feel really good about my night tonight.
Now, we've had guys in the last couple drafts. I mean, I don't know that Giannis Antetokounmpo was hanging around this draft, but like a Devin Booker, guys, Donovan Mitchell, guys who have been drafted a little deeper in the draft and then turned out to be a really good player. Is that guy somewhere that you like that's going to be in the 15 to 28 area?
Yeah, we're definitely going to have that because it happens every year, right? There's somebody that falls, and somebody will, even kind of come back and tell us, like, I knew that guy, was going to be good and should have been drafted, higher, or whatever the case was. There's a couple guys in that range. I really like Alperen Şengün. He's a young big man. He's been playing over in Turkey. This kid offensively looks like he may be one of those dominant power forward center types that comes in and can just really kind of do everything offensively. In his defense, he tries hard. So I think that makes up for the fact that maybe he's not the best defender in the world. So I think he's going to be really good. I think Josh Giddey, the big playmaking wing, I don't think he's necessarily going to be a primary ball handler in the NBA, but I do think as a playmaking wing, he has a lot. And then one guy who I'm starting to really fall in love with towards the end of the lottery is Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga. If for no other reason than I know he's going to shoot. And if you have one elite skill in the NBA, that's enough sometimes. We've seen, Duncan Robinson's probably going to make himself $80 million this offseason because he can shoot at an elite level. I think Corey Kispert can do that for sure. And I think that alone is going to have him, be a guy who, whoever lands him in that late lottery, mid-first round area is going to be really happy tonight.
All right, the NBA draft tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the Sixers with 3 picks, one in the first round, number 28. They pick in the second round, number 50 and number 53. Now, there have been a lot of reports, Keith, that Daryl Morey wants to get rid of that first-round pick. He has been a pretty active guy on draft night, has he not?
Yeah, on draft night or before. He is not someone who builds through the draft. It's never been, his preferred method. Where we're going all the way back to, I believe, the stat, if I have this correct, was 2015 or 16. Sam Decker was the last first-round pick he made with the Houston Rockets.
Wow.
So you're going a while there. So he's not afraid to trade out completely or make the selection and then move the selection on. So it wouldn't surprise me. And I think where Philadelphia is at, you don't need it. Whoever you're getting at 28 is going to come as either they're going to be a finished product who's flawed or they're going to be a complete project. And neither one of those things makes a lot of sense for Philly. If you can put that pick into a trade to get somebody can help you right now, that's the direction to go. And I think that's always been Daryl Morey's draft philosophy.
At Keith Smith NBA, and of course the NBA draft tonight, the Ben Simmons possible deal will loom over the event tonight, as we know. We'll also see other stuff. I mean, the Lakers, Sacramento, they're having some conversation. Keep an eye on all the trades. Keith thinks it's going to be an active night. And, of course, we'll be here tomorrow to recap it all. Keith, well, Merry Christmas, man.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I just hope I get a lot of presents open tonight.
Keith Smith, everybody, at Keith Smith NBA here on the Sports Bash.